Welcome to CBC Windsor News at 6. I'm Meg Roberts. Thanks so much for spending part of your evening with us tonight. There are mounting concerns about border workers being in a legal strike position. That deadline comes tomorrow at 4 p.m. Plus, the city is taking an inventory of significant archaeological treasures, but one Indigenous group says not everything is accounted for. And to mark the 80th anniversary of D-Day, we go through the archives to replay interviews CBC Windsor has done over the years with local World War II survivors. Concerns are mounting on the eve of a possible strike action at Canada's border crossings. Although Canada Border Services Agency workers can't walk off the job, there could be possible delays. The CBC's Dale Molnar has more.
Phil Stewart is a recording engineer who lives in Windsor and works in Michigan. He says delays at the border could cost him money.
If I book a session at the studio with somebody and there's no way I can get to them in time, that's possibly a whole day of work gone.
Other commuters are expressing angst over possible delays tomorrow if CBSA staffers launch a work-to-rule action. Because they are an essential service, they can't walk off the job. But in the past, they've done things like search more vehicles or spend longer time interviewing people. Windsorite Timmery Maritet is an engineer at Ford just across the border.
I don't like it, but I know where they're coming from. I generally support them, but it's going to be, when you're sitting there waiting at the bridge, it's going to be very frustrating.
The Ambassador Bridge reported delays for commercial traffic headed to Windsor today, but it's unclear whether it's related to the labor issues. The president of the Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters is calling on the two sides to reach an agreement. He says $3.1 billion in manufactured goods cross the border each day, and a slowdown would be a massive disruption. The Windsor-Essex Chamber of Commerce also issued a letter to the federal government and the union outlining its concerns, including the impact on the just-in-time delivery of parts in the automotive sector. MP Eric Kuzmerchik says he has also reached out to the Treasury Board.
I share the concerns of our community, speaking with, the Windsor-Essex Chamber of Commerce, speaking with the president of Unifor Local 444. We know how important it is to this community, so we wanted to convey those concerns. So we want to get a deal done as soon as possible.
Kuzmerchik believes that can happen without back-to-work legislation, but he wouldn't say definitively if he would vote in favor of legislating an end to any job action. Mediated talks are continuing throughout tomorrow. The union has set tomorrow at 4 p.m. as the deadline for the strike. Dale Molnar, CBC News, Windsor.
Windsor is updating its archaeological management plan, which is an inventory of areas of potential significance. But Caldwell First Nation says there are some important Indigenous sites missing. CBC's Dawson Chen with more.
Traditional harvesting rites, ancient burial mounds, trading posts, and birthing places. Those are just some of the things that happened at locations across Windsor that aren't recognized in any municipal document, according to Caldwell First Nation. The City of Windsor's archaeological management plan is being updated more than 18 years since it was first adopted. The plan maps locations of the city that have archaeological potential or sensitivity. Despite the city's consultations with 14 Indigenous communities, Caldwell First Nation says the plan is still missing some sites of importance.
The plan doesn't actually identify all of the historic areas that hold important archaeology information, or I should say places of real substance where the First Nations moved, gathered, got married, were buried. These are significant sites. These are prehistoric sites. And these sites should be identified in a wholesome report. And then again, it's about education for all of us, for all the citizens.
Caldwell First Nations archaeologist says part of the issue is that the historic living places of Indigenous peoples weren't defined by the property lines of settlers, nor are they truly defined by our maps today, especially around waterways.
People have lived here for, the Anishinaabe will tell you since time immemorial. We have an archaeological record stretching back over 10,000 years. In the 21st century, we have a habit of thinking about property or land as divided up and personally owned. The concept of property lines causes havoc in archaeology studies. Archaeology is quintessentially a colonial discipline and uses colonial tools.
The city's Development and Heritage Committee approved the plan earlier this week with the amendment that further consultations with Caldwell First Nation must occur before the plan goes before council later this summer. Dawson Chen, CBC News, Windsor.
The city of Windsor is facing a multi-million-dollar infrastructure gap. A new report says the assets the city owns on average are in good shape, but keeping them that way over the next 20 years will take billions of dollars in new spending. The CBC's Chris Ensing has more details.
The city owns nearly $15 billion worth of assets. We're talking roads, sewers, community centers. And a new report says City Council needs to spend significantly more money, each year tens of millions of dollars, just to keep them in their current conditions. This report says that on average, things are in good condition. There are signs of significant deterioration in some key areas. Let's look at Windsor's facilities. This report shows that there's work to do at community centers, fire halls, and recreational facilities, saying that some of those buildings are now at risk of or are no longer fit for sustained service. Staff blame high inflation rates and construction costs and say new buildings are less durable with shorter lifespans. Windsor's parks are also showing significant signs of deterioration. Despite big investments in playgrounds, a third of them are in poor or very poor condition, and the city's 2 skateboard parks will need to be replaced. Transit Windsor has 117 buses, and 40% are either at risk or unfit for sustained service. Those will need to be replaced as well. Windsor buys hybrid buses, but we likely can't buy those after 2030 because of the switch to electric vehicles. However, the aging Transit Windsor facility can't handle those electric vehicles. The report does mention a significant investment from the federal government, which could lead to improvements. City staff crunched the numbers and broke down the funding gap into dollar figures. To keep service levels as they are right now, Windsor needs to spend another $78 million a year. Now that could come from our reserves. We could take that in as debt, or it could come as a tax increase. Council does not need to do anything with this information right now, but it will review the report at next Monday's meeting. Chris Ensing, CBC News, Windsor.
Ontario Premier Doug Ford has shuffled the deck. He's making changes to his cabinet today ahead of the provincial legislature's summer break. Chatham-Kent Leamington MPP Trevor Jones is one of the new faces. He becomes Associate Minister of Emergency Preparedness and Response as part of the Treasury Board Secretariat. Earlier today, the Ontario government confirmed that the legislature will resume sitting on October 21st. Second World War veterans, global leaders, and many others gathered today to commemorate the 80th anniversary of D-Day in Normandy, France. More than 14,000 Canadians stormed Juno Beach on June 6, 1944, to help liberate Europe from Nazi Germany. As Julia Wong reports, the ceremony marked their bravery, service, and sacrifice.
The mood was somber and reflective as thousands of people gathered in Normandy to commemorate the anniversary of D-Day. The ceremony at the Juno Beach Centre involved flyovers, readings from students, and a round of applause as the names of 13 Second World War veterans were read out loud.
Mr. William Seyfried.
A handful of those veterans landed here on Juno Beach on D-Day. Later, those veterans who were the VIPs of this ceremony were brought down to Juno Beach for a visit. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said that Canada was a small country that played a big role on D-Day, and he says Canada remembers those soldiers' stories and their sacrifice.
Democracy is still under threat today. It is threatened by aggressors who want to redraw borders. It is threatened by demagoguery, misinformation, disinformation, foreign interference. We must all continue to stand for democracy day in and day out. We owe it to future generations, and we owe it to the great women and men in uniform who sacrificed so much for our collective freedom.
We spoke to people in the crowd, and many of them came from Canada because they specifically wanted to be here to mark this milestone. There were people of all ages from all different backgrounds. Here's what they had to say about what it meant to be here.
It's incredible to think about the sacrifice that so many made for the freedom of our country and our world. And it's very hard to imagine what this would have looked like. It's such a peaceful place right now.
It was so overwhelming, like this. I only seen it on TV and I read about it in books and learned about it in school, but to actually be here and step on a beach where so many Red River Métis, you could say they were youth, gave up their lives for the war.
You were saying it's just hard to describe everything that you've been feeling over the last little while. Tell me more about that.
Well, it's hard to explain because it's coming out of nowhere, so you don't know why, but it's just a feeling, you know. It's really hard to explain.
Ceremonies to mark this anniversary will continue on Friday, including a commemoration at a Canadian war cemetery. Julia Wong, CBC News, Juno Beach, France.
In honor of the 80th anniversary, we take a look back at some of the interviews CBC Windsor has done over the years with veterans who experienced that day. The first person you'll hear from was one of our own.
Today, you don't have to look far for men and women who experienced the Second World War. Don Sharon, the program officer for Channel 9, took part in the Normandy Day invasion. It was June of 1944. 30,000 Canadians were stationed in Britain, preparing for the invasion of Western Europe. It happened June the 6th, D-Day.
It was hell. They knew we were coming. They had the artillery going on the beaches. We had spent 2 months waterproofing our tanks to get off the landing craft. Many of the tanks went right down to the bottom because the Navy let them off too soon, because you could see the fellows being mowed down on the beaches, and you were in a tank with about 10 inches of steel between you.
You were only 20 years old. Were you at all prepared for the kinds of things you experienced when you were there?
I don't think anybody is prepared fully, even the infantry. They always mention about getting battle experience, and then you learn from battle experience, you know, how to operate and the best way to operate. Sometimes you weren't able to go to sleep for maybe 24 hours. You just slept when you could. One of the first things you did, wherever we stopped and set up, one of the first things we did was dig a slit trench. Was long enough and deep enough of 3-4 feet that you could lay down in it in case you had to, in case you got shelled with artillery or mortar fire.
He was shot down 3 times, twice over Malta in 1942 and again in 44 over Normandy while taking part in the D-Day invasion. Billings says while the war movies might make for exciting cinema, they're nothing like the real thing.
But when you're on fire, you don't think of that. You think of getting out, and you probably get out without a chute. When the stove is hot, you put your hand away.
Were there terrifying moments, or were they?
Yeah, terrifying. You're scared all the time. Yeah, but the first time I was shot down, there was nothing. I was only thinking of survival. And then when I did get out in a parachute, I'm over the bloody water, and I can't swim. There's another problem facing me.
Yesterday's stormy weather had some tragic consequences in a Detroit suburb. A toddler was killed after a tornado tore through a neighborhood in Livonia, Michigan. That's about 35 kilometers from Windsor. Officials say the tornado formed suddenly without time for a warning. The storm uprooted a massive tree that fell on one family's house and came through the roof. It landed on a bed where a woman and her 2-year-old were sleeping. The toddler was pronounced dead at the scene, officials said. The mother was transported to a local hospital in critical condition. Colette, a terrible, terrible story coming out of Michigan. And it's a story like that certainly makes you take these frequent kind of spring storms more seriously.
Yeah, and that's right. And that emphasis on winds, like the damage that the winds can do, not just on their own, but the impact they have on other things like power lines or trees and tree limbs, right? Yeah, really awful situation there. I'm going to take you now. We're going to travel to the southwestern U.S. And why? Because I want to point out here's an area where they're looking at widespread record heat. And you may be saying, well, yes, I know they're in the low 40s, but that is the desert Southwest. But in many communities, these numbers are coming very early in the season. It's still early June. But the contrast is that we're looking at this extreme heat. And then where is the area in North America where things are a little bit cooler, say, or moving towards temperatures that are going to be a little bit below seasonal. And that area is going to be, of course, towards the Great Lakes. So that's what we're looking towards. There we go. Let's get that to advance for you. Right now, we're not worrying about that because our temperatures are doing just fine. Mid-20s looking good there, even some lower 20s for Goderich coming in at 21 and Kitchener at 22. How about humidity? Well, we don't have much to speak of in that regard either. So it's comfortable, the air mass that we're in. But what we're going to find now is we're getting behind that cold front that's been moving through, as that we're going to have those temperatures riding a little bit below seasonal, maybe 3 degrees to 5 degrees below in terms of what we'll be seeing for our daytime highs. So we've got a couple of days where we're moving in that direction, in fact, extending into the weekend. Winds, I know those have been a factor through the day as well, sustained from the west around 30 kilometers an hour, but we've been seeing a lot of those gusts well over 40 and in fact close to 50 kilometers an hour, and we have had even some exceeding that. Here's some of the activity with not just some rain showers but some thunderstorms that have been bubbling up here and there. The more extreme weather, more active weather and stronger storms have really been towards eastern Ontario, and that's the area towards the nation's capital where there's been not only severe thunderstorm watch but even a warning in place there. Otherwise, we've got this upper low, and that rotation and instability around it just means we get into some cloud cover, we get into some sort of widely scattered showers, the risk of a thunderstorm into tomorrow as well. It just remains unsettled, so we get a little bit of everything, including some sunny breaks at times, but you will have quite a bit of cloud cover to contend with. Overnight tonight, those readings anywhere from 13 to 15 degrees for the overnight lows, and this is what I mean, not quite 5 degrees cooler for Windsor, but in that neighborhood. And then we'll start to pick things up as we head into the weekend, and in fact into the weekend we're going to see some improving conditions as well. So I think the timing on that's pretty good, Meg.
It does look pretty good so far. Thanks so much for that, Colette.
You're welcome.
Birders of Windsor and Essex County, you showed up with some of your most beautiful shots for CBC Windsor's first migratory bird photo contest. CBC video producer Mike Evans is our in-house bird photographer and self-proclaimed bird nerd. He was tasked with choosing the winner, and he had his work cut out for him. There were more than 100 entries from across Windsor, Essex County, and he says one photo stood out, Justine Labonte's. Mike caught up with her about her winning shot.
My prairie warbler, I found him at Point Pelee at the Northwest Beach near the sanctuary area. As the sun was setting behind us at the beach, and he actually landed right in front of me. This was a lifer for me.
I understand that some of the people that you know in the birding circles, they call you the bird whisperer. Tell me why that is.
Because I do find some rare birds like the worm-eating warbler here at Ojibwe, and I had the Kentucky warbler.
You don't have to go far sometimes to find those birds, right?
You don't, no, they're right here. I had a few good ones here at Ojibwe already, and Point Pelee is awesome for rare birds.
Tell me about some of the other photos that you submitted to the CBC competition.
One of my favorites was the northern parula. That one was also at the Northwest Beach.
What's the secret for finding these birds? Well, what do you do? Do you use your eyes and your ears? Do you talk to other people? What's the secret?
I do use my ears a lot. I use the Merlin app, and it teaches me all the sounds of the birds. So I do listen for them, and then I get bird alerts for rare birds that lets me know where they are, and then I just got to go in the area and find them.
What's your favorite bird if you had to pick one?
Northern parula is definitely my favorite warbler.
What does it say about this area that we can see all these very interesting birds that a lot of people don't get to see?
We got some of the best birding here in Windsor and Essex County. You can see so many birds here. It's a blessing to live in this area.
You talked about a lifer list. What's next on your lifer list? What's next, Justine, that you would like to see?
A golden wing warbler is next on my list for me.
Nice conditions for a once-in-a-lifetime concert happening in downtown Detroit. The official opening of Michigan Central train station happens tonight. You can see a shot of it there in our camera. We have the details coming up. The Canada Summer Jobs Program is providing placement for more than 600 young people in Windsor and Tecumseh. The government invested $2.2 million in our region to help fund the positions. You have to be between the ages of 15 and 30 to apply. The program runs until August 31st. There was an announcement today at Windsor's Bike Kitchen. It's one of the local organizations which will be taking on students once again.
It's been great so far. I'm back for my fourth year, so clearly I enjoy it. It feels great to be part of such an amazing nonprofit. The work we have to do in the community is really empowering for those local communities. We're currently working on a project giving 50 bikes out to migrant workers in Leamington. So it's awesome to be a part of that, to get to really give back to those who are, getting our food for us every single day. And running day camps is great to teach these little kids how to ride bikes, and it's just awesome all around.
Mm-hmm. Young people looking for a summer job are encouraged to apply on the federal government's Job Bank website. They can also download the mobile app. Well, a defining moment in Detroit's comeback. Tonight, for the first time, the public will get to walk inside the Michigan Central train station. Tonight's opening ceremonies include an outdoor concert featuring Detroit icons like Diana Ross, Big Sean, and the Detroit Symphony Orchestra. The 90-minute concert is already sold out. The once abandoned structure that shadowed the city's Corktown neighborhood is now home to Ford Motor Company and the centerpiece of a sprawling 12-hectare mobility innovation district. Ford acquired the train station in 2018. The building was built back in 1913, but sat vacant for the past 3 decades. The restoration effort cost nearly $1 billion. We have more news coming up after the break. Stay tuned. A program run by the Windsor-Essex United Way is supporting immigrants with young children. This after-school program that's been up and running for 2 years now provides everything from homework support to grocery cards. Windsor Morning's Amy Dodge spoke with a representative of the organization about Ignite Academy.
It's what it's all about, right? Helping the community, really hearing from parents and guardians exactly what that support means to them, right? It could be as simple as she said as a grocery gift card when, money is tight, or that after school tutoring piece, right? Which is so difficult if you're, struggling to help your kids learn math and literacy. It can be really challenging, right? So this is what Ignite Academy is all about.
I can't imagine students saying, I want more school. So there's got to be something different than what they get in school.
You would be surprised. They do say, I want more math. I want,
Right.
I know.
I don't know who these kids are, but
I agree. I'm equally as shocked. But I think it's really about that group, right? There's about 30 students, and we're actually in 6 different schools across Windsor-Essex. And I think that's camaraderie amongst other peers, right? And again, all those experiences that she mentioned, lots of field trips, lots of guest speakers, great recreational activities. Again, just building that sense of community amongst the students.
An ice cream shop in London is getting a jump start on summer by offering up its unconventional lineup of flavors.
The most popular, and one which in fact we brought back from last year, is the Kikkoman soy sauce, which people were very dubious about until they tasted it, and it's the most delicious ice cream. It tastes like sesame seeds.
And if soy sauce is making you think twice about lining up for a scoop, they also serve malt vinegar, olive, and Heinz baked beans flavor. And despite the Adventurous list on the offer, the concept store is surprisingly popular. This is the 3rd year the ice cream project is opening to the public. Most of the ice creams and sorbets are inspired by well-known brands found in British kitchen cupboards. Well, that's it for CBC Windsor News. Don't forget, for news anytime, you can go to our website at cbc.ca/Windsor. You can also download the CBC News app for stories that matter most to you. And don't forget to watch The National tonight at 9 on CBC News Network, 10 p.m. on the CBC News app. Thanks so much for tuning in. Looking forward to seeing you back here tomorrow night.